Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you today. Today is our kickoff to the UNCF Talladega College Career Pathways Initiatives Liberal Arts Innovation Center that we have agreed to work through with UNCF as our partners. And we are delighted today to introduce the team. We call ourselves the core team. We will actually be the team in the education department who will be delivering the content and doing the research on the way that we are working with our students here at Talladega College Education Department. So I'd like for each team member to introduce themselves. We'll start with Dr. Robinson, go to Dr. Bridgewater, and then Dr. Clinton. And my name is Rebecca McKay. I'm the Dean of the Social Sciences and Education here, and I teach in the Education Department. And I'm very excited to have the opportunity today to share with you our study group. We are reading a book and going through a book on lesson study, which is our innovation that we're recommending to other colleges throughout the HBCU network and anyone else who would like to join us. Dr. Robinson, would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Rebecca Robinson, and I am privileged to be the chair of the education department here at Talladega College. I've been working with lesson study back when I was a school principal, and am excited to see the work that we try to implement and will implement here on the college level.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Dr. Bridgewater?
Hello, I'm Dr. Michelle Williams Bridgewater. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My focus here at the college is to teach special education, future special education teachers, and I'm enjoying that process. I'm also enjoying acquiring a new skill, and that new skill is lesson study. I have enjoyed the opportunities I've had to utilize it, and I look forward to continuing to utilize it in the future.
Dr. Clinton? Thank you, Dr. Bridgewater.
Good morning. My name is Yolanda West Clinton. I am the elementary education specialist here at Talladega College. This is my second year in higher ed, actually. And my experience with lesson studies is very limited, but I am excited about this new skill that I'm going to acquire also, and the great team that we have put together to make this happen.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. So I'd like to do a little bit of an introduction. You've already heard us talk a little bit about the innovation that we are implementing and researching here at the Talladega College Education Department is lesson study. And we went through a series of things when we were writing the grant and thinking about the grant. And we used a very specific set of professional learning questions and goals. And I would like to share my screen now with you and talk you through about why lesson study and how we came to think about lesson study as our focus. So one of the things that we have thought about in the beginning of writing the grant and over the last months of really thinking about how we wanted to implement an innovation, we really thought about all of us are busy. This is a very small department, but many of us do multiple jobs and we have multiple roles. So we knew that the innovation had to be small enough that we could actually accomplish it, but actually thinking about the thing that is the smallest that might make the most difference for our students. And so the why of what we have chosen fits the Talladega College goals, and there's the strategic plan here at Talladega College. Recently, the Talladega College leadership worked on the new concepts and new ideas. And we do have, starting 2020, going through several years, some new strategic plan goals. And we feel like our choice of lesson study is going to fit nicely with the academic goals chosen by the committee. And one of our key strategic areas is actually promoting student success through innovative curriculum. And we have chosen to do lesson study as our process, but our content will be to take a close look at active learning strategies that we will actually be doing through a study with an organization that will be disseminating online active learning, professional learning for all of us. Many of us have tapped into active learning. Dr. Robinson and I have been researching it here at the college since about 2015, but we wanted to codify that and formalize it in our department. And we know that professional learning is absolutely essential when you're trying to implement a new bit of content. So all of us will be going through a training of active online and face-to-face teaching. What you will see when you join us for our work that we're doing with our students, you will actually see us in action. And on the piece of the adult learning experience, we have about 20 colleagues who will be experiencing the same training on active learning strategies here at the college that all of us are attending. And they will actually have a time where they can say, oh, this lesson study, let me see how that feels as an adult. Let me go in and watch those students in the education department. How does it look when you implement active learning? So we know that actually feeling and getting excited about an innovation and a process is one of the key things that all of us would want to work toward when we're doing an innovation. And of course, they will be taking a look at us, and we will disseminate through our Innovation Center this same learning for anyone who would like to join us. You will be able to see a live stream lesson studies 4 times throughout the 2 years that we will be implementing this grant. And we really want to show people, what does it look like when college professors are studying their instruction and looking closely at the process of lesson study, as well as the process of implementing active learning strategies. Our colleagues who participate in our Innovation Center will also have the opportunity to have hard copies of all of our documents, all of our lesson plans, as well as hard copies of DVDs of the video showing how we are actually implementing this. And then we also, each time we finish a lesson study, an important part of what we will be doing is to think about what now and what next. What actually worked during that lesson study, what do we need to tweak, and what do we want to do going forward? So this professional development model is grounded in probably 40 years of research. This will be on our website for you to be able to tap into. And I have been using it myself personally for probably about 15 years. And it's basically the continuous professional development model. Some people call it now continuous professional learning, but that's a semantic thing. And I have always called it professional development, even though I think probably professional learning sounds better. Another concept and idea that we will also embrace is that we really want to cultivate a dynamic and supportive learning environment for our students. And that's also one of Talladega College's new strategic goals. We also know that we want to use technology as a tool to support continuous improvement for those of us who are working with our students, as well as the students themselves. So I will stop screen sharing and I'll go back to the full screen and just tell you a little bit now that I have read. We've been breaking up the documents that we are studying, and the book that we're using is a book. It's actually the only book that I know that is actually published using lesson study as an innovation for college professors. And the book is written by Bill Servin, and it is cited in the formal documents that you have the opportunity to tap into on our website. And it's called Lesson Study Using Classroom Inquiry to Improve Teaching and Learning in Higher Ed. And Bill and his colleagues have been doing this process for some time. But I read the introduction in chapter 1, and what really stood out to me was how closely Bill and his colleagues' process matches the process that we will be using here at the college. Once you get into lesson study, it's an easy process to do. And sometimes we think we have to have something really expensive and something that's very costly. But lesson study, we had to think about how we could actually implement something that was small, but something that would make a difference. And there was something that was very powerful that I wanted to bring out to the study group today. And I think it's very important. Catherine Lewis is also well known in the work done by lesson study. And I read this quote, and I want to open the floor to my colleagues to really think about this. This is what Dr. Lewis says. While it may be a simple idea, lesson study is a very complex process. It is supported by collaborative goal setting, which I talked to you a little bit earlier when I showed you the concept of the professional development model. And one of the things that Catherine really thinks about and talks about is it's important for us to be aligned with the college strategic plan. She goes on to say that the collaborative goal setting, the data collection, and we are really looking during this lesson study, not so much at what the instructor or the professor is doing, but we're looking closely at what the students are doing. And we will all be collecting data. The person who is teaching the class, I will teach the first lesson study. My colleagues will be collecting data for me. And then there are very explicit protocols that can enable very productive discussion of anything that arises. Sometimes there will be difficult issues that arise during the lesson study and during the time when we have an opportunity to bring our notes together and really think about, this is what I thought I was doing in this lesson, but what actually happened in this lesson. So the lesson study process itself, on the chapters that I read, first of all, it's not a nagachi for the professor or the teacher. It's looking carefully at the student response to what we thought we were actually doing. So I would just open the floor to any of you who would like to respond to that quote by Catherine Lewis. It's actually on page 11 if anybody wants to turn to that in your book. It's up at the very top of the page.
I like the fact that she talks about it's about looking at focusing on how students learn. And that's the whole point of anything that we do, regardless of what level of teaching you're on. You always want to focus on the students. And I think it also gives us a new way to approach our students and a new way to give them a new way of thinking about thinking, which is what learning is all about. And I think that they're going to enjoy this process. I also enjoy the fact that this particular book really builds, each chapter builds and gives you a better understanding of why lesson study is such a powerful medium to use.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgewater. And Dr. Bridgewater, you've been with us for several years. You've experienced some of the lesson studies that we've participated in before. We did one last fall. Some of our students actually conducted their own public research lessons. So you've tapped into that experience already. That's correct?
That is correct. My first semester here at Talladega College, I was involved in my very first public research lesson. So yes, you can say I was kind of tried by fire, but being tried by fire really lights a fire under you to learn more about the process. And I've been here since 2017, and I have enjoyed the process of learning and growing my skills with lesson study.
I had forgotten, but I think you and I taught small group lessons when Lester Laminack was here.
Correct.
And Lester actually observed us in the lesson study itself. And so you were brave. Thank you for doing that. I remember it now when we started to think about it. Anyone else want to add anything to what has been said so far about Did any of you find anything that resonated with you in that quote, and anything also that I have said about the professional development model that we are using to implement this innovation?
I like the term productive discussion of difficult issues. There's always a better way to do something. And that is true, of course, of teaching lessons. And the way we go about it with lesson study is that no criticism, just productivity. Have you thought about trying this? Maybe you could do that. So there's a better way of saying it than just do this, do that. And I think I like the word productive.
And Dr. Robinson, do you remember the time that you and I did the teach off and we did the public research lessons?
Yes.
We were thinking it was going to be a debacle, but it ended up being pretty good, didn't it?
The students really liked it. It was just one, they thought it was competition. We didn't tell them to the end we weren't competing. Remember?
We actually had the funny idea that if people could have cook-offs, we could have a teach-off. And so it was just kind of a fun thing to get them involved in the lesson studies. And do you remember what you did? A math lesson and I did a reading lesson. That's how we did it, right?
I think so.
So we've had a lot of fun with it. We've been experimenting with it for several years now. And so it's always fun to have colleagues who will jump in there and try something. And Dr. Robinson and I have worked with lesson study before we came to work at the collegiate level. We both are public school colleagues, and she would let me actually come. She was the principal, and she would let me come as a reading specialist and do lesson studies at her school. So we go way back. But I always love talking to colleagues about improving instruction, and she's always been one who has wanted to really have productive discussions, as she said. Anybody else want to add anything before we move on to our next chapter and discussion on the next chapter, chapter 3?
One with 2 or 3?
I believe I'm jumping ahead. It would be your chapter, I believe, Doctor.
It's 2. That's fine.
Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready when y'all are.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I had chapter 2, which is overview of the lesson study process. And the first phase is finding a focus for your lesson study. And usually the recommendations from the research are that you find a difficult topic. I think when we did a lesson at my school in public ed, we probably chose regrouping in math or main idea in reading, those skills that elementary students have difficulty with. And however, at this level and for our grant, UNCF asked us to use the topic of ethics. So our focus has already been chosen. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 would be planning the research lesson, which we've all got to do. And we're going to try to plan as a group our lessons. So one thing that resonated with me in the chapter was using backward design to plan the lesson, because I'm teaching an assessment class. And I wasn't taught in any of my college classes to use backward design. I don't think they had heard, or if that term and using that was not what you did back in the day. But we do teach the students now to look at their assessment and then plan the lesson on how they're going to teach. So I liked that kind of drove that home, so I can bring that back out in my class also. So we will try to use the backward design in planning our lessons. The phase 3 is planning, of course. Phase 4, teach the lesson, observe, and gather evidence. So we'll have observers that will be watching, and so that we can get the lesson documented. And it's been my experience that you as the teacher, and you probably are, we all know this, we don't know some things that are going on while we're teaching the lesson. And I don't mean just misbehaving kids, I mean other undercurrents. So the observers will help us capture that. And 5 is debrief, analyze, and revise the lesson. And I was very pleasantly surprised when we did this with our students here at the college. They really have a lot to say, and they can contribute to revising and analyzing a lesson. They're very good at it. So I'm looking forward to working with them again in that way. Then, of course, the last phase would be documentation and disseminating.
You triggered a thought. I apologize, I broke in on
That's
you.
fine.
But Dr. Robinson and I had the good fortune in 2016 to partner with a local public school and a state a colleague who was employed by the state as a state reading specialist. And our students participated as observers in a lesson study. And it was wonderful because Dr. Robinson and I were just, I don't know, you really never know like what people remember about the theory and the research, but we were delighted when our students started mentioning the theorist. And I was going, yes, you know, they are connecting high level academic language with actually classroom practice, which is exactly what we really want for our students to be able to do. But sometimes it's hard to make it come alive. But I think this was a good opportunity every time that they do a lesson study, that we are often awed by what they have to say during the feedback. And there will be some student observers in these lesson studies with us. We will have to be very careful about social distancing. And of course, we will all be following all the health protocols, and we'll have masks. The observers will wear masks. Those of us who are teaching are probably going to wear a shield, but be further back. But we're a little concerned about how we will be able to hear each other, but I think we'll be able to work through that. But anything else on that chapter or the chapters that you did, Dr. Robinson, you want to bring out, or anybody else have anything, any questions or comments to make about it? Okay.
I just have one thing to say.
Okay.
I was waiting to see if Dr. Robinson was going to add any more, but when I think about what we're doing, it's like having a wide funnel that tunnels down to the main idea. And I view this as the theme is like the focus of what we're trying to do. It's the focal point of what the lesson study will be about. And I think Dr. Robinson shared that with us in her chapter.
Thank you. I love the idea of the graphic of the funnel. I think that might be something we might want to tap into with our students. I think sometimes I call it the death march through an 800-page textbook. By the time we get through, you know, with the semester, we're worn out and we're wondering, do they actually remember much? But I'm thinking that this lesson study with that graphic might be a good combination to make a real connection to them about why we're actually doing this. Because when we do look at lessons and we're giving feedback, you know, we're looking for things that are suggested in best practices and in the research literature and the theory. So I really like that idea of having the funnel. I might have to work on that, Dr. Bridgewater. Thank you. Does anyone else have comments now about what we are studying in Dr. Robinson's chapter? Dr. Bridgewater, would you share your chapter and talk a little bit about what you think resonated the most with you in your chapter?
Well, we're always talking about how we can improve learning. And this particular chapter really focuses on developing research themes that encompass perceived weaknesses. And I thought it was interesting when we started this conversation, and when Dr. Robinson mentioned that we've already been assigned our topic. But I think because of the diversity in our backgrounds, that's going to be a very interesting lesson study, because we all have different things that we're focusing on. And when I think of ethics with my special ed background, I'm thinking about the family educational right to privacy. Mm-hmm. And that will be my main focus when it comes time for me to do my lesson study. Now, one of the things that I really like about lesson study is that your whole focus is, and you're always thinking about, how am I going to improve my instruction? Mm-hmm. How am I going to improve the way students receive information? and retain that information. Now, one of the things that my chapter talked about was the fact that there were 3 goals. And the goals are the learning goals in the lesson process. There are 3 reasons for it, excuse me, not goals, but reasons for this. Well-defined goals communicate expectations to students, assisting them with where they need to focus their efforts. Learning goals are the backbone of the lesson in that they provide a clear focus for the lesson design and what experiences will support and assist students with reaching the desired outcome, which of course is the outcome of understanding and being able to present the lesson and show us that they understand and have learned the concept. Learning goals provide a blueprint of the types of learning and thinking you expect to see in the classroom. Now, we're always here at Talladega College talking about theorists. Well, lesson study is no different. And in looking at this particular chapter, it talks about taxonomies. And the taxonomies are by a person called by the last name of Schulman, 2002. And when Schulman talks about taxonomies, he talks about one called Making Differences. A table of learning proposes that multiple abilities are likely included in complex learning. And he provides us with a taxonomy of educational objectives, excuse me. And this is on page 33 for those who are following along.
And you're in chapter 3, right?
3, page 33. Okay, well, as he talks about these educational objectives, he starts out talking about knowledge. In order to have knowledge, you have to have memory of previous material. In order to comprehend, he talks about comprehension. In order to comprehend, you have to understand the topic that's being presented or the information that's being presented. We understand whether you are obtaining this knowledge by looking at how you apply it. So application is the next step that he talks about. And he talks about how you use that new knowledge, how you share your understanding. Analysis. Analysis is the way that you examine and break information into parts. And as one of my colleagues always talks about, Dr. Clinton, always talks about our thinking skills, our level of thinking. And one of the things that, as we go along with this process of discussing and learning the educational objectives, you will see how we go from the simple to the complex. Synthesis is compiling information in a different way. Then we have evaluation. How do students present and defend what they've learned? Engagement and motivation. How do they involve themselves in what you're trying to teach and in the process? Knowledge and understanding. Can they recall what you've been talking about? Can they restate information to show how they interpret that information and how they're able to give it back to you? Performance and action, using their knowledge in action. Reflection and critique, how they use the criteria and the content to be able to evaluate it in that manner. Judgment and design, how can they make decisions for themselves about what they've learned? Commitment and identity, how do they internalize these values? And that's what we want all of our students to do. We want them to internalize the learning process of the skills that we are trying to introduce to them. And if they can internalize those, and if they have the ability to give it back to us in many different ways, from analysis to engagement to their performance of action, then we know that they understand the concept well, and they're able to go forth with it being internalized as they move forward and share it with others.
And that's on page 36, that last piece that you talked about, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think I had an aha moment.
Okay.
We will actually be living what we expect the students to be doing in the use of the content that we're teaching them, which kind of sounds crazy. But those students who are not directly in the lesson being taught by one of us, those students who are surrounding us, who are in the observation group, should really have some aha, particularly when we connect it to when they do their portfolio assessment and they have to collect data through video. I think this chart will be very helpful, Dr. Bridgewater, on page 36, for us to bring to them to really, this might actually be useful to them when they're writing their commentary on their video. So I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to put a sticky note and remember, you know, we have Dr. Robinson, Dr. Clinton, and Dr. Bridgewater. Don't you think our most senior students would be really benefited by being a part of this lesson study, since they're going to go out and they're actually going to do they'll be the next group out to do Ed TPA. So I'm putting a note, and that's on page 36, that we might ask them to take a look at that chart. Y'all excuse me, I'm going to pull out my desk drawer. It's going to make a creaking sound, but I'm going to put a note on here. And do you think, Dr. Robinson, do you think we might have about 6 students that we could invite to participate with our other professors in the observation phase of this? Dr. Robinson, you're on mute.
I hope that a couple of those that you might have in mind are actually in the field.
Okay, but
yeah. 4, I can think of 4 that won't be.
Let's make a list. We don't have to call out names, but I want us to take action on that. So that was really got me going. Anybody else want to make a comment? I apologize. I just jumped in and took over on chapter 3. And Dr. Bridgewater, did you want to add anything to what you read in chapter 3? You're on mute. Mm-hmm.
I can't get this straight. But anyway, as I think back on this, and we were talking about how in learning, it moved from the simple to the complex. I'm thinking if we can show them the various ways that they can demonstrate their knowledge, and I think that this chart provides that then they can focus on how they want to make sure that they are incorporating this in their teaching, mm-hmm. and what they're expecting from their students, and the various ways that they're expecting acknowledgement from their students that they understand.
Yeah, I've looked at this book and studied this book a long time, but until you actually talked about it today, I don't think I made that connection that this would actually be good language stems for them also when they do their commentary and their reflection. Others might have different thoughts about it, and I'm wide open, but I may give it a go with some of the students who are not in the final phase of their work here doing their internship, but I might actually try this with some of the work that we'll be doing in the spring with other groups of students beside the lesson study group. Thank you so much. Anybody else have comment or other thinking about chapter 3?
I think it's very important, the goal setting and the fact of when she mentioned depth of knowledge, and yes, I do talk a great deal about that and teach a great deal about that in my courses, because students, just being in the K-12 sector when I was, and we were sending out seniors to the workforce, they had no critical thinking skills. They had no depth of knowledge. They could not apply, synthesize. They could not do any of those things and evaluate. So if we can get those skills internalized into our students through our lesson studies, and then they will in turn be able to transmit that information onto their students, and they will see through our lesson studies firsthand how to actually get that going, or how to actually, make an activity to actually make it happen. Because we must produce those critical thinking skills in our students. It's mandatory.
I had another aha. you know, sometimes professors are in like their own little compartmentalized silo. So this has been fun for me because I'm learning that in the courses that you're teaching, you are covering that depth of knowledge. And so now I'm really, because I know you and I share some of the same students this semester. So I know if you're talking about it and they're telling me they're struggling with it, they're getting it at least 2 times, if not more, this semester. So that's fun. And I think this lesson study process and the book study that we'll be tapping into will be, it will make us take the time to have the conversations that sometimes we don't feel like we have the time to do. Because already today I've learned so much by listening to you guys, and I just am there. I'm getting more and more excited about, you know, having these opportunities to have these discussions, and, you know, the fact that we will actually be able to share this with the students. One of the things that I have noticed over the last, particularly the last 2 or 3 years, I'm new to college teaching. I've always been a reading specialist and a teacher. And when I did finish my degree, I really had, you know, I didn't have any concept about college teaching because I had not done it. And I think that what I have noticed about the students here, they've really grown through the process where we've actually had them begin to do their own lesson studies during their field experiences. And I have been shocked. Recently, I asked them, I did a focus group because all of these extra things that we do, you know, it's a lot. We have a lot on our plate. And so I asked them how they felt about the meetings that we have. We do professional learning and we invite our school partners in, and we call it a summit. And the students have begun to actually do breakout sessions at those summits and actually teach lesson studies and public research lessons. And the public part of a lesson study is just, they just open the door and say, I'm doing this session. I'm inviting anybody at this summit who would like to come and be a part of a lesson study in my lesson. And I said, I was kind of hoping the students would say, yeah, we're kind of tired of the summit, you know. And they said, oh no, absolutely not. The summit is the best thing we do. And we're even getting accustomed to doing the public research lessons. And it is a culture, I think, though, that we've built here. And Dr. Robinson and I, Dr. Robinson started here before I came. She actually was the one who let me know about the possibility of being here and applying for the job. And so we thought lesson study would be a good idea, but it really has paid off. And I think those of you who don't know the history of the work that we've done here, we feel really good about opening this door for our students to open their door to others, to say, hey, I'm going to teach this. I need your feedback. And again, we go back to those very structured protocols in lesson study, and they actually feel pretty safe doing it because it's highly facilitated. You know, there's a protocol for the way that we give feedback. And it's been fun for them to have teachers who are actually in-service teachers giving them feedback. So it's a pretty powerful way to enter them into the idea of reflection and thinking about how to improve what they are doing without being offended or upset. So I think, is it Dr. Clinton? You had a chapter, or did you do 4 for us?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say? Anything that popped into your mind, like any experiences that you've had before we move on? Well, I'm turning to chapter 4. I can't wait. Thank you all.
Okay. As Dr. McKay started with a quote, there was one in my chapter also that continues to resonate with me, and I'll just read it to you guys. To be a teacher does not simply mean to affirm that such a thing is so. It's on page 47. Or to deliver a lecture, etc. No, To be a teacher in the right sense is to be a learner. Instruction begins when you, the teacher, learn from the learner. Put yourself in his place so that you may understand what he understands and the way he understands it. Kierkegaard, The Point of View for My Work as an Author, 1848. Guys, when I read that, I had an aha moment. It was like, wow. Even after being an educator for 30 years, it was still a wow. It was a wow moment, not just aha. It was like, wow. Because you teach, you write your objectives, you have your goals, you do backwards design, you do all these things, but do you really take the time to put yourself in the place of your learner? You know, or are you just spitting out information or instruction and have all these great activities and ideas, but are you really taking an in-depth look at how your student is perceiving it and where they are? Yes, we know where they are academically, but how are they really, really in tune with you? You know, are they really, really learning it from you the way that you're actually delivering it? Put yourself, and I, even last week, I had to put myself in the place of my students in my class. And I was like, okay, well, maybe they didn't get that, or maybe let me just kind of sit back, and I let them take over the class, and I could see where there was a little disconnection. So it is very important that we do put ourselves in the place of our learners and how they're perceiving us and what we are delivering to them. Okay, so from that, the lesson, the book chapter goes on. This one is talking about designing and planning the research lesson. Actually, you know, actually putting it on paper and carrying it out. The term lesson is often thought of as a teaching and learning episode that takes place in a single class or session. But a lesson is not defined solely by a segment of time, okay? A lesson has a point. Doesn't matter how long or how short, but it has a point. A learning goal that instructional activities are organized and sequenced to achieve. In this sense, a lesson can be viewed as a conceptual unit of teaching. So the day-to-day work of teaching is organized around planning and teaching individual class lessons that can take place in a single classroom setting, laboratory, studio, hall, anywhere, okay? The lesson produced in a lesson study is called a research lesson or study lesson. The terminology emphasizes that the lesson is developed for the purpose of study and not simply as a regular class lesson. You want to get into the depth of knowledge. You're studying it. You know, you take it and you study it, and you start with the end in mind and move forward towards your goal and reach the goals that Dr. Bridgewater spoke about in chapter 3. It says when you're designing the lesson, especially as higher education instructors, they sometimes they know the content, but they have a difficult time with strategies and delivery. So there's this one first-year college teacher who talked about their concern as a first-year teacher in the college and was told he would just teach, lecture basically, and put it in he would read it and put it in his own words. Well, like that just wasn't going to do it. He said, like many inexperienced teachers, I was most concerned about just covering the subject matter. Didn't matter if the students got it or didn't get it, or, you know, if they had an aha moment or if they created some critical thinking skills. So subject matter is important, But for that reason, we want to make sure that students learn it though. So we have to put it where they can learn it. So that's where the lesson study puts the student at the center of the lesson design. Your lesson is designed around your student, for your student, where your student is missing something, where your student's weaknesses are, your lesson study will address that issue, okay? There are numerous factors that influence our choices when we organize and plan the classes. Mode of instruction, disciplinary preference for specific modes of instruction, how I'm going to do it. Situational factors like what grade level are the students, instructors' familiarity with different modes of teaching, and instructors' knowledge of student learning. Instructors' general specific understanding of how students learn affects their day-to-day instruction. You have to know how your students learn. You know, are they visual learners, kinesthetic learners, auditory learners? What type of learners are they? That's how you design your lesson. And there are 5 significant features of the design process. This chapter talked about collaborative design, the backward design, making student thinking visible, cognitive empathy, and learning how the instructional activities affect student learning. Those are the 5 features of the design process when you are getting ready to create and design your lesson. One thing that I would like to, there was a chart on page 51, table 4.1, I'm sorry, it's a table, not a chart, 4.1, 2 versions of a lecture. And it was really, really good because it compared a standard lecture approach, which is what I did my first semester here.
I did it too.
And then there was a take students learning into account approach. And I'll just give you 2 examples. Like for version A, the instructor gives a preview of the lecture, identifies the goals, major themes, concepts, and ideas. Yes, okay. But in when we take the student into account, the instructor assesses the student's prior knowledge of the topic and uses information to plan the lesson. Take their prior knowledge, knowing where your students are, okay? Not just, okay, class, this is what we're going to learn today, and we're gonna move forward, okay? And then another example was proceeds to describe and explain the subject matter throughout the class period, just that subject matter, okay? But give a preview of the lesson, identifies the goals, major themes, concepts, and ideas, presents a 20-minute lecture explaining the different interpretations of the concepts from the student's prior knowledge. So we can probably further investigate or research this table, but those were the things that resonated with me, and I think is going to just help us with our design and implementation of the lesson study process.
While you were reading that, that was on page 51, it occurred to me that this fits that strategic plan goal. And it really talks about cultivating a dynamic and supportive student environment, and where they talk about assessing student prior knowledge. I don't know, I love everywhere, all of the places where I attended school, so I'm not denigrating anyone, but there was only one place where I attended school, and it was in my PhD program, where I felt like that the professors really knew who I was and what my background knowledge was. And I think that attributed to my success in my program, because they really spent a lot of time getting to know all of us. And I think one of the things that I have really enjoyed here at the college is that this is a small school and it's a small department, but we do a lot together. And, there's nothing like in human growth and development, and Dr. Bridgewater will be teaching that next semester. And even in Ed Psych, there's so many ways that we can, get to know our students. And I think in every class, I just often walk up and down the hall, not spying on anyone's instruction, but it's really fun for me to see how students are responding to the work that other people are presenting. And I think that it might be, I could be wrong, but it might be unusual for people to really realize that it's important for us to really think about what students already know. And I'm not sure that when I first came into the collegiate world that I knew that it was important from a reader standpoint and from a reading teacher standpoint, but I was struggling with how will I get it all done, because my analogy of that slow death march through the 800-page textbook, I really struggled with that. But I had to realize that many people talk about the teaching and the instruction being an inch deep and a mile wide instead of really, really deep. And I think the state standards and the standards that our students have to be able to implement in their lessons, once I got into those courses where they were really having to write reading lessons, I had to cut back on the 800-page textbook and really spend a lot of time getting to know them and working with them. And by the time that their tenure is over with us, and you take them through lots of literature and lots of writing and teaching these public research lessons, it is amazing if you look at the curriculum as being deep instead of wide, what our students can actually do. It was hard for me to let go of some of that content that I thought, I absolutely had to teach. But I realized in a semester, if they're going to actually teach and write and read and actually disseminate information in the lesson plan and actually do the public research lessons, that there was no way that I could cover an 800-page textbook. So I had to really distill, I think. Does anybody else see that in the work that you're doing? And when I first came, I thought when I was handed that textbook that I had to cover it. I know this sounds naive, but remember, I'm not a career college professor. And so I thought, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to make a mistake. But do any of you see that in the work that you're doing? Has anyone else felt like that? That you got to cover it all?
Oh, I definitely have. Matter of fact, teaching the technology course that I'm teaching this semester, the textbook that I chose from the online program is really wide.
Mm-hmm.
It has some depth in it, but it's really wide. And comparing it to another textbook that is more hands-on,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I can take maybe a little from that,
Mm-hmm.
the wide book, I'll just say, for foundational purposes and background, but practical use and sitting in the student's chair, that the other textbook is better, because I was trying to like word for word, still they have, I got to get them this, they have to know that, and when really they've got to know how to apply, summarize, evaluate, and use it. So yes, ma'am, I have.
Other comments?
I agree with what you're saying. I hope I can be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it's important for us to remember we are fortunate that we have been out there in the field. We know what it's going to take for them to function out in a K through 12 environment. And I think that allows us to make decisions concerning what's being taught from the curriculum. And I think that's one of the advantages we have in not necessarily being career academics, but being K through 12 people who are out there actually doing the work.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really, those of us who have been in the classroom, and we're all retired from, public school work. It is hard to discern what are the most significant things. And I'm wondering, since this team has been together through the process with the Alabama State Department of Education through our CHIP process, where we're looking at our content standards, I have felt some relief when I go back into my course description and I look at what I said I was going to do based on those standards, that the content standards that the state asked us to follow. And I've had some, I've had some relief there, because I often, when I write my daily lesson, you often start with an inquiry question, and I usually put the standard down that I'm trying to model for my students, that all of us, even college teachers, use standards when we teach. And so that has brought a sense of relief to me, looking at our course descriptions and making sure that we are actually able to go deep with those standards. And particularly in the reading work that I do, that's my focus. Of course, I teach other courses here. I teach some of the foundations courses, but those foundation courses also are connected to the standards that we are required to teach here in our state. And I'm sure the other HBCUs and colleges have their own certification processes and to be certified and to be accredited to teach college students. But it is interesting when you think about connecting that to what we've all just been through with, trying to go through our reaccreditation process. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment, or, anybody had another aha moment or anything that they think they might use the next day or two? I'm using wait time.
I appreciate it. I just want to say I'm looking forward to continuing reading the rest of the book and to gather more information on how we can effectively implement lesson studies. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
And I found a chart on page 65 and 66. It's not labeled and numbered as such. It goes with the appendices 4.B on page 64. But when you think about this chart, many of the things that are on here, I think looking at the course that we will all be taking, the online training on active learning strategies, I think I have crossed paths with the language that I see on this chart. There's think, pair, share, peer instruction and concept test, think aloud, pair, problem solving, the 1 minute paper, the muddiest point response, the group discussion, and the jigsaw technique. And I use some of those in what I do, but I might try to start experimenting with some of those, since I will be first out of the chute around November. I'll be teaching the first public research lesson on the team. And we all talked a little bit about our focus. When we think about the ethics of teaching, there's so much that goes into that. And I was delighted to be the first person to go, because I'm teaching ELE, which is Elementary 304, which is materials and methods of reading instruction. And there's so many ethical considerations when we're teaching our students to read that I'm thrilled to be able to share that information and some of the research on that, because I'm really finding that I have 11 students that you'll be seeing in that lesson, and they have been so engaged with the content. I've kind of been shocked. I've been working on the surface work with phonics and phonemic awareness, and we're moving into fluency. And I have been having them, when I rewrote the course description on this, I decided to focus on small group instruction. And we hear and we've seen in our public school work that small group is often a hard sell and people really struggle with it. And the students are really attending to the content because they then turn around and actually perform through a very structured small group lesson plan the content. And so they're working right now on building a fluency lesson. And I was kind of delighted because yesterday they would not let me alone about what book they wanted to teach. And so I'm thinking that looking at it through this lens, I'm hoping that they will be able to really share some of the ethics of teaching. I basically, told them that whether you're a principal, a reading specialist, a first grade teacher, or a fifth grade teacher, you'll have someone that you cross paths with who will not be able to read. And the ethics of not knowing all of these skills and strategies will be on your shoulders if you have someone and you don't know what to do. So I'm going to have to write that down and remember it because I don't think I put that much guilt on them before. But they really are loving it. And I'm just shocked. I've never had a group since I've been here, and I've been here since 2015, who have been so engaged with the materials and the methods. But you're going to get to see them in action around November. So I look forward to working with all three of you to help me write that lesson. And basically what I'm going for in that lesson is as teachers, they will also be leaders in their building, and what they learn with us, you have an ethical obligation in teaching reading to make sure you know the materials and the methods that's supported by the research so that you can make sure all of your students actually, you're able to help them. You may not be able to help them as much as you want to help them, but you will at least know enough to get them help, and you will know how to take a look at where they are. So I want to end with this quote. It's on page 3, and I think when we started doing the innovation center grant, we thought about what is the smallest thing that we can do for the innovation that could make the most difference for the most students throughout our network of HBCUs and other colleges and universities. And the quote says, lesson study is so simple, but if you really want to improve instruction, you got to start. And absolutely, what could be more obvious than collaborating with fellow teachers to plan, observe, and reflect on lessons. And I just love that. And I'm looking forward to all of you. So I'm giving you a heads up. I want you to already start to think about that ethical question about, you will be responsible, and you don't want to leave any student not being able to do all the basics of reading and to actually comprehend and to decode and be fluent. So it's working for me this semester, and I'm just tickled. I can't wait for y'all to meet the class and really get to know them because they are quite something. And I will just end by doing one more quick whip around. Does anybody have anything else from the study that we've been doing so far with Bill Servin's book? Anything, any aha moments, anything that you're experiencing in your class that you might be trying, or other things that you're going to try from this book that you would be willing to share?
I'm just looking forward to pulling students in to this process and having them understand what we're trying to accomplish. And then I'm looking forward to getting their buy-in.
And Dr. Bridgewater, one of the things, we will be live streaming this lesson. So our students who are not actually one of those 10 or 11 students in my class can actually watch. And I think we can really make a powerful learning experience. This year, we will probably not do our summit because of social distancing. And we may do a virtual summit, and this may be it. This lesson study may actually be it. We can send it out there. and make it available to our public school colleagues and try to, make that connection with them. I have missed the idea of planning and thinking about our summits, but this may be it for us. Anyone else have a comment or any thinking that they would like to put forth?
I saw my old standby jigsaw as
Yes,
one of
page
the strategies.
64.
So I'm sure I'll be using jigsaw.
Great.
When
Do you
I
think
saw,
you're going to use it in your lesson study? Dr. Robinson is next. She'll be the second person to do
Yes,
the
I'm
lesson.
sure I'll use it. I'm familiar with it.
Good.
when I saw Jigsaw, I immediately thought of Dr. Robinson.
We have worn the jigsaw out. I can tell you, she and I both have.
But I too, when you said maybe make this live stream it for our public educators,
Mhm.
I think that would be such a phenomenal thing to do, because I'm sure they are struggling also with instruction and delivery and, strategies. And so that was great. I think we should really, really look into doing that.
So what I'll do next, thank you for that follow-up thought. I need to set my date. And of course, our colleagues in public school do not have to watch it live, even though we're going to try to live stream it. And we will videotape it and make it a permanent opportunity for them on our website that's connected to the UNCF and Talladega College Pathways Initiative Liberal Arts Center for Education. And so they will be able to tap into it. And I think we can also make all of our lesson study materials available to them. Many of our colleagues in the public schools allow us to do lesson study in their schools, and they know about it. But to actually institute lesson study, they will actually have the tools and materials that we're going to make available through our Innovation Center. So I'm really kind of excited about that. I'll try to get my date set within the next couple of days. I have a meeting on Monday with Dr. Hawkins to talk a little bit with him. I'd like for him to kick that lesson study off. And so we'll see what he says about a date. We want to make sure that it's a date that he could actually do it. Other comments or anything before we say farewell to each other? And you all don't know this, but we're all in the same building, but we are taking social distancing to the nth degree. We are closed up in our offices with no students right now, but we have mask ready right by the right hand of each one of us. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful for me. And I know that I have a tendency to really overthink things, but I think it was a wonderful opportunity for us to get together. And I feel kind of warm and cozy just knowing that you all are going to have my back that day that I do the lesson. And one thing that you need to monitor for me is I talk too much. So you don't have to blast me, but I need to remember I'm going to really pose the inquiry question the day that we do this work. You will hopefully see the students doing the conversation and the talk around a series of inquiry questions. So much love to everyone. I hope you have a great afternoon and just start to think about, what else we need to do. Take care.